Hello again. You know what? Because it's my birthday and because I'm just kind of sitting here bored by myself, I think I'm going to make another video. Yay! Not that you care or anything, but what the heck. So I just subscribed to Doom Antidote, and he's talking about his favorite books from childhood. So I thought I would talk about some of my favorite books from childhood too, because why not? Now, I was obviously, I was a kid that liked to read a lot. I always had a lot of books around me when we could afford it. We always, we always tried to. I absolutely loved the book order days. So what was it, Scholastic Book Fair? That was the best time ever. um, and I spent probably way more time in the library, both my school library and the city library, right? So I just always had a lot of books around me, and I always loved books as a kid. So I was trying to think about what got me to this point, and I tried to sort of go chronologically, but obviously since I read so many books as a kid, and it was, my childhood was a very long time ago. We're going back to the late 70s, early 80s, when I was actually a child, that I just tried to pick a few select books that really stood out in my memory. I always felt like it took a long time for me to learn how to read, but that's because my sister started reading very, very young. She started reading when she was about 2, and it wasn't just memorizing the story. She could actually read the words on the page. And when we were very young, I was not quite 2, and she would have been about 4. My mother was moving out of the place where we had lived, and then the place where I actually grew up, like where I lived until I moved out at 18. And because she was moving, our dad took us on this big long hitchhiking trip. And it was the 70s, right? It was safe to hitchhike with a couple of little kids with you. And apparently, my sister and I were comparing notes about it later, because I only have a few very, very brief shining memories of that time. But apparently we did, we traveled, we went to Ottawa and Montreal, and to a property that I guess my dad owned somewhere in Northern Ontario. And I don't know whatever happened to that property when he passed. I really don't know. But anyway, so one of the memories that sticks out from that time, I remember I was very little. I was sitting on my dad's lap, and he had a big copy of To Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street by Dr. Seuss, which has just gone out of print. Which it was gone out of print, but I guess it was problematic modern wise, so it hasn't been in print for a long time, so they have kind of taken it out of circulation now. So, but that's one of the books that kind of stands out in my memory, because I remember really struggling, just trying to make the words on the page make sense, and the word that I was struggling with was "the." And my sister was sitting there whispering in my ear, and she was excited because "the" was one of the first words that she had learned how to read. And I remember my dad telling her to be quiet and let me figure it out myself. And my sister and I were talking about it later, and she said that I was just being so stubborn, and I was just this awful kid. And I was like, I wasn't even 2 years old. I was not even 2 years old yet. It didn't make any sense. It just was not clicking in my brain. I was very, very little. Like, you can't have that kind of arrogance and intent when you're 2, right? But anyway, so for a long time, I remember feeling just totally inadequate because I couldn't read yet. And I began reading it's so funny how it happened, because I remember that's another one of those very, very clear memories. I was about 5, and I went to kindergarten in the mornings, and then I went to a daycare up the street in the afternoons, because my mom was working at the time, and then that was where she picked us up after work. And I remember sitting at a desk, it was like the corner of the playroom, and I had Dr. Seuss again, and it was this one was one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. And I remember really struggling to sound out the words. And then all of a sudden, it was just like a key turning in the lock. Just suddenly, something in my brain just shifted, and all of a sudden, all the words made sense. And I was about 5 at the time. I was 5. And from there, I just read everything I could get my hands on, because it was, I had struggled for so long that suddenly the fact that it made sense was amazing to me. And I just kept reading and reading and reading. And so, so I remember a little bit later in kindergarten, reading, there was an education teacher that was working with me. I didn't realize they were doing IQ tests and stuff at the time. And so the one that I was reading in that particular environment was Ramona the Pest. And I remember her asking me questions and getting them wrong. But by later in kindergarten, I was reading so smoothly and so well that they sent me to read with the grade 1s, which, I mean, hooray for peaking at 5, reached my intellectual peak. So yeah, Beverly Cleary would be the next author that was really impactful on me. I read so many of her books when I was a kid. And when she passed away, that one really hurt. That one was just like so much a part of my early life. It was like, oh no, she's gone. What am I going to do? So the next one that really formed a part of my life was the Chronicles of Narnia. We had them in paperback when I was a kid. We had these beautiful illustrated covers. And the first set that we had, I remember loaning it to one of my classmates, and he never returned it, and I was so mad. So then we got I think I got another set much later, like in high school. And it still had a lovely cover on it. And I had those for a long, long time. And probably every year, I would take them out and reread them. And I eventually my mother eventually bought the full copy. It was all of the collection in one book. And I would, again, take them out and reread them periodically. And even now, here's an admission for you. I have the audiobook, and the audiobooks of the Chronicles of Narnia are some of the best audiobooks I've ever heard. They've got an amazing lineup of readers. Kenneth Branagh reads The Magician's Nephew, and Patrick Stewart reading The Last Battle is the best audiobook. Hands down. Just the best. I want Patrick Stewart to adopt me and read me a story at night. But most days, right, because I work nights, so I sleep during the day, I'll get my noise canceling headphones on, and I'll actually put on the Chronicles of Narnia more often than not, and I'll just let the narrators narrate me to sleep. So that one's kind of always going to be probably part of my my life until I get really sick of it. So from the time I was probably maybe 6 or 7, right up until I started reading adult books, I liked to read. I didn't just read the individual books, but I read the authors. And so I would like an author, and I would just read everything I could of theirs. And some of the authors that I really enjoyed were Beverly Cleary, of course, Judy Blume, that was a big one, Catherine Patterson, who she wrote the Bridge to Terabithia, but she also wrote a whole bunch of other books that I really enjoyed. And anything that had the Newbery medal stuck on it, I was right there for it. Monica Hughes was another one that I really liked. The Tomorrow City and Devil on My Back were probably early introductions to sci-fi for me. Because it was sci-fi, but they were really, really good characters and just a really conceptually interesting set of books. Now, obviously, I'm too old for the Goosebumps and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark existed, but that it wasn't one that I ever picked up. But I love Bunnicula. I know that sounds so weird, but Bunnicula was just so cute. The first adult book that I read was Carrie by Stephen King, which I've mentioned before. And obviously from Carrie, I went on to read pretty much every Stephen King book that was available, and my mother had them all. Probably way younger than I should have. And another author that I really liked when I was a kid was Bernice Thurman Hunter. She wrote 3 books. I think 3. There was that Scatterbrain, Buki. Can't remember what the second one was, and From Buki with Love, I think was what the last book was called. And they were about a young girl growing up in the Depression. And they were loosely based on Bernice Thurman Hunter's own experiences in Depression-era Toronto. And those were great books. I really liked the characters. I really enjoyed the situations she got herself into. And I liked the setting, that reading about Toronto in the 30s, what it was like. And they did actually make a couple of TV movies that were based around the stories. They weren't, I don't think they were popular, and they weren't, Canadian television adaptations aren't really that great. But what I found was kind of funny is that a number of the actors that were in Degrassi were not the original, not my Degrassi, but Degrassi: The Next Generation. A lot of them were in the Buki movie, which I found kind of funny. And another book, if you want to call it that, I guess, that really formed my horror past was when I was a kid. My sister had read she had won a children's illustrated Bible, and it was put out by Little Golden Books, but it was like this beautiful cover. It was this big, beautiful hardcover. It was about yay big, nice thick book, and it had these really rich, lovely illustrations in it. And I remember just being absolutely terrified at the there was the Joseph and the Joseph in the Dreamcoat, that one, or the Coat of Many Colors, that's what it's called. And it showed, he had a dream about, there were the fat cows and the really skinny skeletal ones. I remember that scared me. And the story of Passover with all the blood, the lamb's blood on the door jambs, that scared the hell out of me too when I was a kid. So if you ever want to know what freaked me out as a kid, for some reason, that illustrated Bible did. Don't know what that says about me now and my love for horror, but that was probably one of the origins of it. And I believe that would be all of it. I wanted to talk about Buki because I took a class in women authors, and the prof offered the idea at the time that many Canadian women, especially if they're writers, are somehow influenced by Anne of Green Gables. She didn't unpack it any further, but I've always kind of mulled over that. I think I read the first one and maybe one other one, but it was a long time ago. I don't remember too much about it. I remember a boy putting salt in Anne's milk. That's all I remember about any of the books. So if I did read it, it's another one of those that was so long ago. I don't remember too much about it. And I don't know if I agree with the idea that Canadian women writers are that heavily influenced by Anne of Green Gables. But Bernice Thurman Hunter was, and she even, what's her name, even makes the author of Anne of Green Gables actually makes an appearance in one of the books too. So that was kind of interesting. Oh, and then the other book that really affected me as a kid was A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. I loved those books as a kid too. So, especially the Meg character, because she was weird and she was angry, and I think that there are a lot of young women that can relate to her far more than they can relate to the Bellas or the romantic heroines of a lot of books. And yeah, we like the girl that fights and the girl that does well in school. I think that's all the books that I would like to talk about that influenced me as a kid. I read a whole lot. And I tended more to read books that were sort of realism or that had more realistic characters than I tended towards the fantasy or the really abstract kind of stuff. I mean, I still read those books and enjoyed them, but I liked the more down-to-earth kind of books. Yeah, I think that's about all that I can remember really, really standing out. I mean, I could sit here all day and talk about the books that I like to read as a kid, but those are the ones that really, really stood out to me and that I wanted to kind of mention. And those are the ones that I would recommend if anybody said, "Oh, what should my kid read?" But I don't know if a modern kid would actually enjoy the books that I read when I was a kid and enjoyed. So who knows? That's probably yet another reason I'm not a parent, right? Hope you're reading lots of great horror. Have a great day.